The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 11,000 years. Nobody questioned their power. Nobody challenged their authority. They controlled trade routes, settled disputes between species, and decided which civilizations would rise and which would fall. Their word was law across 300 star systems, and their fleets could reduce entire worlds to ash. 47 species sat in the Great Assembly Hall on Prime, the capital world of galactic civilization. The hall itself was a wonder of engineering, a dome of living crystal that shifted colors with the moods of its occupants. Representatives from ancient empires debated alongside delegates from younger species, all of them bound by the Council's rules, all of them afraid of the Council's wrath. Among these species, humanity was considered little more than a curiosity. They had discovered faster-than-light travel only 93 years ago, a blink of an eye by galactic standards. There, a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star produced beings who were soft, fragile, and short-lived. The average human barely survived 8 decades, while some council species measured therein. But there was something strange about these humans, something that made the older species uneasy. They spread quickly. Within a century of achieving interstellar travel, human colonies dotted dozens of worlds. They adapted to environments that should have killed them, building cities in frozen wastelands and scorching deserts and toxic atmospheres. They formed friendships with species that had been enemies for thousands of years, somehow finding common ground where none had existed before. And they asked questions, endless questions. They wanted to know why things were done a certain way, why certain species held power while others served, why the Council's decisions could not be appealed. They challenged traditions that had stood for. They demanded seats at tables where they had not been invited. High Counselor of the Dominion found these humans particularly irritating. His species had ruled 3 sectors of space for 6,000 years. They were tall, elegant beings with silver skin and eyes like polished obsidian. They considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic evolution, the rightful masters of all lesser creatures. Remembered a time before humans had crawled out of their gravity well. He remembered when the galaxy was orderly, when each species knew its place, when no one questioned the natural hierarchy of things. These humans, with their short lives and shorter memories, had no respect for tradition. They acted as if their opinions mattered. They behaved as if they were equals. It was insulting, it was dangerous, and had decided it needed to stop. The opportunity came in the form of a routine diplomatic mission. The human vessel Meridian had requested permission to conduct a cultural exchange visit in space. Such visits were common, a way for species to learn about each other and build understanding. The Council generally encouraged them, believing that cultural contact reduced the likelihood of conflict. Approved the request personally. He had plans for the Meridian. The ship departed from Earth on a bright spring morning, carrying a crew of 12 and 5 diplomatic staff. Among the passengers was Ambassador Warren, a veteran diplomat who had spent 2 decades building bridges between humanity and alien species. She had negotiated trade agreements, resolved border disputes, and earned the respect of beings across the galaxy. But had not made this journey alone. Standing beside her at the departure ceremony was her daughter, Lily Warren, 12 years old, with hair pulled back in pigtails and a gap-toothed smile that could light up a room. Lily had begged her mother for months to join this mission. She had studied culture, learned basic phrases in their language, and prepared a presentation about Earth customs to share with the alien children she hoped to meet. Her bedroom walls were covered with star charts and pictures of distant worlds. She dreamed of becoming an explorer, of visiting every corner of the galaxy, of making friends with beings from species humanity had not yet encountered. Had hesitated at first. Diplomatic missions could be unpredictable, and she worried about exposing her daughter to potential dangers. But Lily's enthusiasm was infectious, and the sector was considered safe, one of the most civilized regions of space. In the end, decided that this would be an educational experience her daughter would never forget. She was right about that, though not in the way she had hoped. The Meridian's journey took 3 weeks, passing through 7 star systems before reaching space. Lily spent most of that time pressed against the observation windows, watching nebulae drift past and stars wheel overhead. She asked questions of everyone she met, from the ship's captain to the engineering crew to her mother's diplomatic aides. Captain Samuel Price, a weathered veteran of 30 years in the United Earth Navy, found himself charmed by the girl's curiosity. He gave her tour of the bridge, explained how the navigation systems worked, and let her sit in the command chair during quiet moments. The crew adopted her as a sort of mascot, a reminder of what they were working to protect. "She's going to go far," Price told Ambassador Warren one evening as they watched Lily sketch the binary star system they were passing. "That kind of curiosity, that kind of fearlessness, those are rare gifts." Smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "She wants to be the first human to visit the Andromeda Galaxy. I told her that was impossible with current technology, and she said she'd just have to invent better technology." Price laughed. "I believe she might do it." On the 15th day of the voyage, the Meridian entered space. Lily could barely contain her excitement as the ship approached the first world on their itinerary, a planet called Minor that was famous for its floating cities and crystalline forests. But they never reached Minor. 8 hours after crossing the border, as the Meridian cruised through what was supposed to be a safe shipping lane, the ship's sensors detected multiple contacts emerging from the darkness of space. Captain Price was on the bridge when the alert sounded, and his blood ran cold when he saw the readings. 12 warships, heavy cruisers armed with enough firepower to destroy a small moon, had in a perfect sphere around the Meridian. The human vessel had no weapons, no shields worthy of the name, no way to fight or flee. "This is Captain Samuel Price of the diplomatic vessel Meridian," he broadcast on all frequencies, struggling to keep his voice steady. "We are on an authorized cultural exchange mission. Our transit permissions were approved by High Counselor himself. Please identify yourselves and explain this interdiction." For a long moment there was only silence. Then a voice came through the speakers, cold and precise and utterly without mercy. "Human vessel, you have entered a restricted military zone. This area is forbidden to all non-traffic. You are in violation of sovereign territory." Price's hands shook as he gripped the arms of his command chair. "There must be some mistake. Our approved route passed directly through this region. I have the documentation right here, transmitted by your own government." "There is no mistake," the voice replied. "The Council has authorized the removal of this vessel and all aboard. Let this be a message to Earth. Know your place." In her cabin 3 decks below, Warren heard the alarms begin to wail. She grabbed Lily and pulled her close, her mind racing through options that did not exist. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nothing she could do to protect her daughter from what was coming. "Mommy," Lily's voice was small, frightened, all her excitement and wonder replaced by dawning terror. "Mommy, what's happening?" Held her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, sweetheart. I love you so much. Whatever happens, remember that. Remember that I love you." On the bridge, Captain Price was still trying to negotiate, still hoping that this was some kind of misunderstanding that could be resolved with words. He offered to turn back, to leave space immediately, to do anything they wanted if they would just let his ship and crew go. The commander did not respond to his pleas. The first plasma bolt struck the Meridian's engineering section, rupturing the reactor containment and sending sheets of flame through the lower decks. The second hit the crew quarters, killing 8 people instantly. The third and fourth and fifth came in rapid succession, tearing the ship apart piece by piece. Captain Price died at his post, still broadcasting appeals for mercy that no one was listening to. Ambassador Warren died with her arms wrapped around her daughter, trying to shield Lily from the fire and vacuum and debris that consumed everything. Lily Warren, 12 years old, who had dreamed of touching the stars, died in terror and pain and confusion, never understanding why this was happening to her. The warships watched the wreckage burn for several minutes, ensuring that nothing survived. Then they cloaked and leaving behind only debris and silence. On Prime, High Counselor received the report with satisfaction. The humans had been taught a lesson. They would understand now that the galaxy had rules, that there was a hierarchy, that some species were meant to lead and others were meant to follow. Perhaps they would send angry messages. Perhaps they would file formal protests. But in the end, they would accept their place, just as every other young species had done. Settled back in his chambers, pleased with his work, the human problem would solve itself now. Fear was the greatest teacher. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. 3 days after the attack on the Meridian, a salvage ship from Earth's Navy arrived at the coordinates of the ambush. They had tracked the vessel's emergency beacon, a signal that had continued broadcasting for several hours after the attack before finally going silent. What they found was a field of debris stretching across thousands of kilometers. Hull fragments, personal belongings, frozen bodies floating in the void. The salvage crew worked in grim silence, recovering what they could, cataloging the evidence of what had happened. Deep in the wreckage, protected by layers of shattered bulkheads, they found the Meridian's black box. The device was designed to survive anything short of complete molecular disintegration, recording everything that happened aboard the ship until the moment of destruction. Commander Lisa Park, leader of the salvage operation, watched the recordings in her quarters that night. She saw Captain Price's desperate attempts to negotiate. She heard the commander's cold declaration that the Council had authorized this attack. She watched Ambassador Warren hold her daughter in those final moments, telling her she was loved. And she saw Lily Warren's face in the ship's farewell video, recorded just before departure, talking about all the wonderful things she was going to see and learn and do. Park had served in the Navy for 15 years. She had seen combat, lost friends, witnessed horrors that still visited her in her dreams. But nothing had prepared her for this. Nothing could prepare anyone for this. She transmitted the black box recordings to Earth with a simple message. They murdered them, all of them, a 12-year-old girl. They did it on purpose. They did it because they could. On Earth, the recordings spread like wildfire. Every major news network broadcast them. Every social media platform was flooded with clips and screenshots and expressions of grief and rage. People gathered in the streets, not in protest, but in mourning. Candles were lit. Flowers were laid. Lily Warren's gap-toothed smile appeared on screens and walls and buildings across the planet. In the Pentagon's deepest bunker, a place that officially did not exist, Admiral Cole stood before the Joint Chiefs of Staff and presented his analysis of the situation. Cole was 63 years old, a career military officer who had served in every major human conflict of the past 4 decades. His hair was iron gray, his face was lined with experience, and his eyes held a calculating intelligence that had earned him both respect and fear. "They believe they have accomplished their goal," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Their intelligence reports will tell them that Earth is in mourning, that our government is in crisis, that we are debating how to respond through diplomatic channels. They expect us to file complaints with the Council, demand investigations, threaten economic sanctions." He touched a control, and the screen behind him displayed a map of space, 3 sectors encompassing nearly 50 star systems. "They believe we are weak. They believe we are primitive. They believe we lack the capability or the will to respond with force. Our intelligence indicates that they have not even raised their defensive alert status." President sat at the head of the table, her hands folded before her on the polished wood. She was 57 years old, a former senator and diplomat who had won the presidency on a platform of peace and cooperation with the galactic community. She had spent her career building bridges, seeking common ground, believing that understanding and communication could solve any problem. 3 days ago, that belief had died with 17 human souls in space. "What are our options?" she asked. Admiral Cole nodded. "The Council believes we possess approximately 700 combat-capable vessels. Our actual number is closer to 12,000. They believe our weapons are kinetic projectiles and nuclear warheads, appropriate for a species at our supposed developmental stage." He brought up new images on the screen, schematics of weapons and ships that made several generals lean forward in their seats. "They do not know about Project Prometheus. They do not know about the dimensional fold drives. They do not know about the stellar conversion cannons or the zero-point energy shields or the quantum targeting systems. General Hammond, the Air Force Chief of Staff, spoke up. How is that possible? We've been members of the galactic community for almost a century. They must have observed our capabilities. Cole almost smiled. They observed what we wanted them to observe. From the day we made first contact, we understood that the galaxy was a dangerous place. We understood that the Council maintained power through the threat of force. We understood that any species perceived as a threat would be suppressed or destroyed. He clasped his hands behind his back. So we let them see what they expected to see. Primitive ships, crude weapons, a species that posed no danger, that needed guidance, that could be safely ignored or controlled. Meanwhile, in shipyards hidden in the outer reaches of our territory, we built our real fleet. President stared at the schematics on the screen. You're telling me that we've been preparing for this moment for decades. Not this moment specifically, Cole replied, but a moment like it. We always knew that eventually the Council or one of its member species would decide that humanity was a problem that needed to be solved. We prepared accordingly. The president was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with a weight that seemed to age her years in seconds. Casualties if we proceed. On our side, minimal. Our technological advantage is substantial. On theirs, Cole paused. That depends on what kind of message we want to send. We can conduct surgical strikes, targeting only military installations and leadership figures, or we can demonstrate to the galaxy what happens when someone kills a human child. Define demonstrate. Cole's expression did not change. The Dominion has ruled 3 sectors for 6,000 years. In 3 months, those sectors could be empty, every ship destroyed, every station dismantled, every world stripped of any capacity to threaten anyone ever again. General Robert, the Army Chief of Staff, spoke quietly. That would be genocide. No, Cole replied. Genocide would be killing the population. I am proposing the complete dismantling of their military, economic, and political infrastructure. The people would survive, but the Dominion would cease to exist as a functioning power. President looked around the table at her advisors. She saw fear in some eyes, doubt in others, and a cold, terrible hunger in a few. The decision before her would reshape the galaxy. It would define humanity's place among the stars for generations to come. She thought about Warren, who had dedicated her life to building peace. She thought about Captain Price, who had died begging for mercy from beings who had none. She thought about Lily Warren, 12 years old, who had dreamed of touching the stars. The president stood up. "They believe they taught us a lesson. I think it's time we taught them one instead. Admiral Cole, you have authorization to proceed." Cole saluted. "Yes, Madam President." 3 days later, the Galactic Council was in session on Prime. The representatives of 47 species had gathered to discuss trade agreements and territorial disputes, and the 1,000 other small matters that kept galactic civilization running. High Counselor sat in his elevated chair, pleased with himself and his place in the universe. The human ambassador was conspicuously absent. The Council had expected protests, demands, perhaps even threats. Instead, humanity had been silent since the destruction of the Meridian. Some representatives found this worrying, but assured them it was simply proof that the lesson had been learned. "They understand now," he said dismissively when a delegate raised concerns. "They know that defiance has consequences. Within a generation, they will be properly grateful for our guidance." He was still speaking when the Council's communication array detected something impossible. All across Prime, sensors screamed warnings. Ships were emerging from nowhere, appearing in space through some unknown means of travel. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. 12,000 human warships materialized in perfect formation around the Council's capital world. They simply appeared, as if stepping through invisible doorways, their hulls gleaming with technologies that the Council's scientists could not identify. They moved with precision that suggested a single controlling intelligence, spreading out to encircle the planet in a sphere of steel and fire. On Prime, panic erupted. The Council's defense fleet, 40,000 ships stationed throughout the system, scrambled to respond. Admirals shouted orders. Crews rushed to battle stations. Weapons powered up, shields activated, and the greatest military force in galactic history prepared to face these upstart humans. The battle lasted exactly 6 minutes. Human weapons operated on principles that the Council's scientists could not comprehend. Their missiles seemed to teleport past shields, appearing inside enemy vessels and detonating before anyone could react. Their energy beams bent around obstacles, curving through space to strike targets that should have been protected. Their ships moved in ways that known physics, accelerating and changing direction without any visible propulsion. When the flagship, the Pride of, fired its primary weapon at the nearest human vessel, the bolt of plasma that could have cracked a planet simply passed through empty space. The human ship had moved impossibly fast and was now behind the flagship, its weapons already charging. The Pride of ceased to exist 3 seconds later. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the tactical display as red dots winked out by the hundred. He felt no pleasure in the slaughter, no satisfaction in the destruction. This was not vengeance, not really. It was a message, written in fire and blood and the wreckage of 40,000 ships. Admiral, his communications officer reported, the fleet has been reduced to 12% effectiveness. The Council's defense stations are offline. Planetary shields are down. Cole nodded. Open a channel to the assembly hall. On Prime, in the crystalline dome where 47 species had gathered to rule the galaxy, every screen flickered and changed. The image of Admiral Cole appeared before them, his face calm, his eyes cold, his uniform immaculate despite the battle that had just concluded. "This is Admiral Cole of the United Earth Navy," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. 47 minutes ago, your defense fleet ceased to exist. Your orbital stations are disabled. Your planetary shields are down. Your communications with the wider galaxy have been severed. He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. You are, at this moment, completely defenseless. I could order the bombardment of this world, and there is nothing you could do to stop me. Every government building, every military installation, every center of power on this planet could be reduced to ash within the hour. High Counselor surged to his feet, his silver face contorted with fury. This is an act of war. The Council will not tolerate such aggression. When word of this reaches the other sectors, fleets beyond counting will descend upon Earth and— High Counselor, Cole interrupted, his voice cutting through the alien's tirade like a blade through silk. I was hoping you would speak. I have a message for you specifically. The Admiral's expression did not change, but something in his eyes made take an involuntary step backward. 17 days ago, you ordered the destruction of the diplomatic vessel Meridian. You ordered the execution of 17 human civilians, including Ambassador Warren and her daughter, Lily Warren, age 12. You did this not because they had committed any crime, not because they posed any threat, but because you wanted to send a message to Earth. You wanted us to know our place. Cole leaned forward slightly, and every being in the assembly hall felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. We received your message. This is our response. On Earth, President addressed a global audience from the White House. The broadcast was carried on every channel, transmitted to every human colony, shared across every communication network. Behind her, images played of the Meridian in happier times, of Lily Warren's school photographs, of her artwork and her letters about wanting to explore the stars. For 100 years, the president said, humanity has reached toward the cosmos with open hands. We sought friendship. We sought understanding. We sought to join a community of intelligent beings and contribute what we could to the great project of galactic civilization. Her voice hardened, and those who knew her well saw something in her eyes that they had never seen before. We asked for nothing but the chance to learn and grow alongside our galactic neighbors. We accepted insults and condescension with patience. We smiled at jokes made at our expense and worked twice as hard to prove ourselves worthy of respect. She paused, and when she spoke again, her words carried the weight of a civilization's grief. 17 days ago, the Dominion, with the full knowledge and authorization of the Galactic Council, murdered 17 human civilians. Among them was a 12-year-old girl whose only crime was dreaming of seeing the stars. President looked directly into the camera, and billions of people on dozens of worlds saw their own anger reflected in her face. Let the galaxy understand this clearly. Humanity does not seek war. We do not desire conquest. We would have been content to grow quietly among the stars, to build and learn and explore in peace. But we will not accept the murder of our children. We will not bow to those who believe that might makes right, and we will not permit such an atrocity to go unanswered. On Prime, Admiral Cole continued his address to the trembling council. The Dominion will surrender High Counselor and all military personnel involved in the attack on the Meridian. They will pay reparations to the families of the deceased, amounts to be determined by a human court. They will cede their 3 sectors to a transitional government under human supervision. Their military will be disbanded. Their weapons will be destroyed. Their ability to threaten anyone ever again will be removed. He let the silence stretch for a long moment. These terms are non-negotiable. You have 1 hour to comply. A representative, not but a younger diplomat whose name stood shakily. His voice trembled as he spoke. And if we refuse? Cole smiled, and it was the coldest expression any being present had ever witnessed. Then there will become an asteroid field, and I will make the same offer to whoever remains. And if they refuse, I will make the offer again and again and again, until there is no one left to refuse. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted at each other, at the screens that still showed Cole's implacable face. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for resistance. A few simply sat in stunned silence, trying to comprehend how completely their universe had changed in the span of an hour. Stood at the center of the chaos, his silver face pale, his hands shaking. He had expected the humans to file protests. He had expected diplomatic incidents and economic sanctions and strongly worded letters. He had not expected this. He had not expected to lose. A general approached him, his voice low and urgent. High Counselor, our analysis of the human weapons suggests they are operating on principles we do not understand. Their ships appear to use some form of dimensional manipulation that our scientists cannot explain. If they choose to attack, we cannot stop them. Then we will die with honor, snarled, but even he could hear the hollowness in his own words. The general shook his head. With respect, High Counselor, there is no honor in extinction. The humans are not offering death. They are offering survival for our people if not for our power. If we refuse, billions will die for your pride. Looked around the chamber at the faces of his allies and rivals, all of them watching him, waiting to see what he would do. He thought about 6,000 years of dominance, all the victories and conquests and achievements of his people. He thought about his own legacy, his place in history, his name remembered for generations. And he thought about the human child, the girl with the gap-toothed smile who had dreamed of stars. 43 minutes later, was surrendered to human custody. The trial was held on Earth, in a courtroom in Geneva that had been built specifically for this purpose. Representatives from every species in the galaxy were invited to observe, and billions more watched through live broadcasts. It was the most viewed event in human history, and possibly in galactic history as well. Stood before the court in simple prison clothes, stripped of his ceremonial robes and symbols of office. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, as if the power he had wielded for so long had been the only thing holding him together. The prosecutor was a human woman named Grace, whose own grandmother had once been a victim of genocide on Earth. She presented the evidence methodically, without emotion, letting the facts speak for themselves. The recordings from the Meridian's black box, the communications between and the military, the authorization he had personally signed, ordering the destruction of a diplomatic vessel and everyone aboard, the testimony of officers who had carried out his commands, some of whom had come forward voluntarily, seeking to distance themselves from their former leader's crimes. Defense attorney, a human man named Daniel who had volunteered for the case, because he believed that even monsters deserved representation, did his best. He argued that it acted within the legal framework of the Council, that the attack on the Meridian was authorized by galactic law, that humanity's response had been disproportionate. Grace demolished each argument with quiet precision. "The defendant claims he acted within galactic law," she said in her closing statement. "But galactic law does not authorize the murder of children. Galactic law does not permit the execution of diplomatic personnel. Galactic law does not allow one species to slaughter another simply because they find them inconvenient." She turned to face directly. The defendant believed that humanity was weak. He believed that we were primitive, insignificant, not worthy of respect or consideration. He believed that he could kill our children and face no consequences. Her voice dropped to barely more than a whisper, but it carried clearly through the silent courtroom. He was wrong. The jury deliberated for less than 30 minutes. Guilty on all counts. The sentence was life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Would spend the rest of his considerable in a human prison, never again to see never again to wield power, never again to decide who lived and who died. As he was led away, a reporter managed to shout a question at President, who had attended every day of the trial. "Madam President, what message do you hope the galaxy will take from these events?" Considered the question carefully before responding. She thought about all the diplomatic cables she had written, all the bridges she had tried to build, all the compromises she had made in the name of peace. Then she thought about Lily Warren. "We came to the stars hopping to find friends," she said slowly. "We still hope for that. Humanity has always been at its best when we work together with others, when we build rather than destroy, when we reach out rather than strike out." She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a weight that made everyone listening feel the gravity of her words. "But let no one mistake our desire for peace as weakness. Every human life is precious to us. Every child who dreams of the stars deserves the chance to see them. We will protect our own, whatever the cost." The president looked directly into the camera, and across 1,000 worlds, billions of beings felt themselves pinned by her gaze. "The galaxy has 47 species. We hope in time to call all of them allies. We want to share our knowledge, our culture, our dreams. We want to explore the universe together, to answer the great questions of existence, to build something beautiful that will last long after any of us are gone." Her expression hardened. "But if any being, any government, any power in this universe believes that human blood can be spilled without consequence, they will learn the same lesson the Dominion learned. We do not retaliate proportionally. We do not respond with measured force. When you harm our children, we will dismantle everything you have built. We will break your fleets, burn your empires, and leave your worlds as warnings for any who might follow your example." President straightened, and in that moment she seemed to embody not just herself, but all of humanity, all 7 billion people on Earth and all the billions more scattered across the stars. Humanity does not forget, and we never, ever forgive those who hurt our children. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. The Dominion, stripped of its military and economic power, slowly began to rebuild under human supervision. A transitional government worked to establish democratic institutions, to build a new society from the wreckage of the old. Some embraced the change, seeing it as an opportunity to create something better. Others resented it, nursing their grievances in silence. But none of them could deny the fundamental truth of their situation. They had started a fight they could not win, and they had lost. The only question now was what kind of future they would build from the ashes of their defeat. The council itself underwent a fundamental transformation. The old hierarchy, based on military power and ancient tradition, gave way to something new. Species that had been dismissed as inferior now demanded seats at the table. Decisions that had once been made by a handful of powerful beings were now subject to broader debate and consent. Humanity took its place among the great powers of the galaxy, not as supplicants or subordinates, but as equals. Human diplomats served on council committees. Human scientists collaborated with alien researchers on problems that had stumped single species for. Human artists and musicians and writers contributed to a flowering of galactic culture that enriched everyone it touched. And throughout the galaxy, a new understanding took root. Humans were not the weak, primitive creatures they had appeared to be. They were something else entirely, something that the older species had never encountered before. They were survivors. For 300,000 years, humanity had clawed its way up from the African savanna. They had survived ice ages and plagues, wars and famines, every catastrophe that nature or their own foolishness could throw at them. They had learned, the hard way, that survival required both strength and cunning, both the ability to fight and the wisdom to know when fighting was necessary. They had hidden their true capabilities not because they were weak, but because they were smart. They had understood from their first contact with galactic civilization that appearing too strong would make them a target. So they had played the role of primitives, bumbling newcomers who posed no threat, while secretly building the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. And when the time came, when someone finally pushed them too far, they had revealed what they truly were. Not conquerors, not destroyers, not monsters. Protectors. On Earth, in a small cemetery outside of Chicago, a statue was erected. It showed a young girl with pigtails reaching toward the stars. Her face wore an expression of wonder and joy, captured forever in bronze, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been fought for. At the base of the statue, a simple inscription. Lily Warren, 2147-159. She dreamed of touching the stars. Now they remember her name. Visitors came from across the galaxy to pay their respects. Some of them weeping, laying flowers and tokens of apology at the feet of the girl their leaders had murdered. Representatives from council species came, bringing gifts and messages of condolence and solidarity. Beings from worlds that humanity had never contacted before came, curious to see the child whose death had changed everything. And humans came, of course. Endless streams of humans, young and old, from every corner of the Earth and every colony among the stars. They came to remember Lily Warren and what she had represented. They came to renew their commitment to the values she had embodied. They came to promise in their hearts that no child would ever suffer what she had suffered if they had the power to prevent it. Warren was buried beside her daughter, reunited in death as they had been inseparable in life. Captain Price and the other victims of the Meridian were interred in a special memorial nearby, heroes who had died serving their species. The cemetery became a place of pilgrimage, a sacred ground where the past and the future met. School groups came to learn the history of the Meridian incident and its aftermath. Diplomats came to remind themselves of the weight of their responsibilities. Military officers came to understand why they served and what they were protecting. 10 years after the attack, on the anniversary of Lily Warren's death, President, now retired, returned to the cemetery. She walked slowly among the headstones, pausing at each one, remembering the faces and the stories she had come to know so well. When she reached Lily's statue, she stopped and looked up at the bronze face for a long time. "I hope we made you proud," she said quietly. "I hope we built something worth building. I hope that somewhere, somehow, you're still dreaming of stars." A voice spoke behind her. "I think she would be." Turned to find a young woman standing there, perhaps 20 years old, with dark hair and earnest eyes. She wore the uniform of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps, brand new by the look of it, and she carried a small bouquet of flowers. "I'm sorry," the young woman said, looking embarrassed. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to pay my respects before I ship out for my first assignment." Smiled. "Where are they sending you?" "Minor, I'm going to be working on the Cultural Reconciliation Project." The young woman's face lit up with enthusiasm. "It's the same world the Meridian was supposed to visit. I thought it would be fitting to start there." The former president studied the young diplomat for a moment, seeing in her the same fire that must have burned in Lily Warren, the same curiosity and courage and hope. "What made you want to join the diplomatic corps?" she asked. The young woman looked up at Lily's statue. "I was 7 years old when the Meridian was destroyed. I remember watching the news, seeing her picture, not really understanding what had happened, but knowing it was something terrible. And I remember thinking that someday I wanted to help make sure nothing like that ever happened again. She laid her flowers at the base of the statue, then straightened and saluted, a gesture she had probably learned specifically for this moment. "My name is Cole," she said. "I'm Admiral Cole's granddaughter. He used to tell me stories about the war, about what he saw and did. He never talked about the fighting, not really. He always talked about what came after, about how we had to build something better, something that would last, something that would mean all those deaths weren't for nothing." President felt tears prick at her eyes. "Your grandfather was a good man, terrible in war, but good. He understood that winning the fight was only the beginning." Nodded. "He died 2 years ago, cancer. But before he went, he made me promise to keep building. He said that was the only way any of it would mean anything." The two women stood in silence for a moment, looking at the statue of the girl who had changed everything. "You know," said finally, "when I gave the order to respond to the attack, I wasn't sure we were doing the right thing. Part of me wanted to try diplomacy, to work within the system to find a peaceful solution. But then I looked at Lily Warren's picture, and I knew that some things couldn't be forgiven. Some things had to be answered." She turned to face. "I don't regret the decision. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the galaxy was the kind of place where a child could be murdered to make a political point. But the decision itself, no, I would make it again." "Considered this? Do you think we've changed things, really changed them?" "I think we've started to," replied. "The galaxy is different now than it was before the war. Species that never would have spoken to each other are working together. Ideas that were suppressed for are being discussed openly. The old order is gone and something new is being born." She looked up at the stars, barely visible in the afternoon sky, but there nonetheless. Lily Warren dreamed of touching the stars. She never got the chance. But maybe, because of what happened to her, other children will. Human children. Children from species we haven't even met yet. Maybe they'll grow up in a galaxy where no one is murdered for dreaming too big. Smiled. "That sounds like something worth working toward." "It is," President said. "It's the only thing worth working toward." They stood together in the cemetery as the sun moved across the sky. Two women from different generations, united by their commitment to a dream that had cost so much and promised so much more. And far above them, beyond the atmosphere and the moon and the asteroid belt, human ships continued their patrols. They watched the borders of human space, protected the colonies and outposts and settlements that stretched across dozens of star systems. They remembered Lily Warren. They remembered the price of complacency. They remembered what humanity had been forced to become to protect its own. And they promised, in their hearts and their actions and their eternal vigilance, that no child would ever again die because someone thought humanity was too weak to fight back. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity never forgot. And somewhere among the stars, in a dimension that human science could not yet measure, in a place that faith called heaven and philosophers called the unknown, a little girl with pigtails smiled. Her dream had come true in a way. She had touched the stars. And now they remembered her name. The Galactic Council met for the first time under the new charter on the 20th anniversary of the Meridian incident. Representatives from 63 species gathered in a new assembly hall, built on a neutral world that belonged to no one and everyone. The humans sent a delegation led by President Samuel Warren, nephew, who had dedicated his life to public service in memory of his aunt and cousin. He stood before the assembled representatives and spoke of hope and healing, of the future they could build together, of the mistakes they must never repeat. At the end of his speech, he unveiled a gift from Earth to the new council. It was a holographic display, showing the faces of everyone who had died aboard the Meridian. 17 humans, their images rotating slowly, each one accompanied by a brief biography and their own words about why they had chosen to serve. Lily Warren's image appeared last, and the entire assembly fell silent. 12 years old, President Warren said. She wanted to be an explorer. She wanted to make friends with aliens and discover new worlds and learn everything there was to learn about the universe. She never got the chance. He looked around the chamber at the representatives of 63 species, some of whom had been enemies for. We built this council so that no one else would have to die the way she died. We wrote a new charter so that no government could order the murder of civilians without consequences. We created new institutions so that disputes could be resolved without violence. His voice grew stronger. But laws and institutions are not enough. They never have been. What matters is the commitment in our hearts, the determination in our souls, the promise we make to each other and to the future. President Warren raised his hand, and across the galaxy, billions of beings watching the broadcast raised their hands as well. We promise to remember Lily Warren. We promise to honor her dream. We promise to build a galaxy where every child of every species can reach for the stars without fear. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely more than a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. We promise that her death will not be in vain. The assembly rose as one, 63 species standing together, united by a shared commitment to something greater than themselves. The council had killed a human girl. Earth had not retaliated. It had obliterated them. And from the ashes of that destruction, something new had been born. Something better. Something that would last. Lily Warren had dreamed of touching the stars. Now, because of her, the stars touched each other. And the galaxy finally began to heal.